So echoes along with spells are a really integral part of the combat system in Ouroboros because not only do we have magic, we of course have the custom weapons. So here I'm just going to demonstrate a echo that I force generated for you. Ignore some of the other bits that I need to eventually edit out, but pretty much what we want to pay attention to is the echo ID. That tells us how to recreate it, what kinds of materia were used, as well as kind of giving a general picture to the player as to how they can go about recreating that exact same thing. Sometimes there will be some deviations with general stats, but generally speaking, depending on the binding and the base that you use, the two primary stats that will generally be the same are the attack rate and the critical rating. And that's because both the base and the binding essentially determine the overall level and magnitude at which those will spawn at, versus the attack damage and the critical modifiers are dependent solely on the rarity of each of the base and the binding. So, for example, the attack damage is dependent on the base's rarity. The attack rate is dependent on the base type, so in this case, gold. Same thing, critical rating is dependent on the rarity of the binding, as well as the critical modifier is dependent on what type of binding you use. So if we were to essentially put all of these pieces together, the creation catalyst, the gold nugget, and the string binding, we'll get ourselves relatively this same echo. The modifiers, though, will be more or less completely randomized. But yeah, hope that kind of explains it a little bit better. And for clarity's sake, we can kind of take a look at three different tiers of the same echo. Literally the only thing that has changed is the base. Keeping the same rarity and all that good stuff, we can see here that the iron sword comparative to the golden sword has much lower base attack, but we do have higher critical rating and critical modifier on the golden sword comparative to the iron sword. They also have a higher rate of receiving more crit bonuses, higher attack rating, especially comparative to golden sword. They typically like to focus on doing as much crit damage as possible, as well as applying some debuffs or some other statuses that you might not see in other weapons. Also considering that we're not talking about anything with a element core here, we also have a diamond sword. In diamond swords, we can already see crit modifier a lot higher comparative to, well, it's lower comparative to the gold sword, but a lot higher than the iron sword. And of course, we have a higher base attack damage rating than the other two because we're at a higher tier. Especially considering that a sword might not have the same binding as the golden sword, it does have a lot lower critical rating to boot. So hope that provides a little bit more clarity and some context behind how these numbers are considered. I'm talking a lot about materia, but I'm not really showing you guys how to go about acquiring materia. Pretty much, in terms of the bindings, we acquire them just by killing mobs as normal. It's like, to receive string, you can either break cobwebs or kill spiders for pelt, or essentially rabbit hide. You just kill rabbits. Same thing with leather for cows and so on. In terms of the other ones, though, whenever you smelt the raw copper, iron, and gold, you'll receive the iron ingots just like normal, especially with the diamonds. However, these diamonds will become my plug-in diamonds whenever they are added to your inventory. Similarly speaking, whenever we were to craft iron ingots into iron nuggets, I can use my spell reconfigure for this. We can go ahead, open up a crafting grid, and then see here that we can just craft iron nuggets, and then they all become iron slag. Most of this is still in prototyping, but the Protocol Alpha refinement branch essentially handles the necessary process that you'll need to conduct in order to refine your unrefined materia. And so pretty much what we do is we were to just place unrefined materia in this. It will kick you out if you try to put anything that is not a materia into this grid. You can, of course, read this at your discretion if you need further clarification. But pretty much what I'm just going to go ahead and do is put the iron slag into the refinery. And then here we can see that we can just simply click on the result, or we can collect all. So how this works The rarity of refinement that you get is entirely dependent on your refinement stat. So if I were to go ahead and craft this and then use OBS stats, we can see that my refinement experience has gone up a little bit. And so as you progress, you'll start unlocking more levels, and that will dictate the overall buff to your refinement as you continue doing so. So if I were to go back in here and I were to try and re-refine this for further, for another chance to up the rarity of this materia, I can do that. Of course, too, we have a chance that it will fail. At levels before 10, all you get is scrap materia. That means that you've failed refinement, and you can use this in essentially further crafting. As we can see over here, I have the refinement, I don't know, reservoir, if you will. And then if I read over this, we can just right-click it, and all of that will be added into your HUD.